My name's Professor Tania Sourdin. I'm the Dean of the University of Newcastle Law School. I've probably got some other roles as well, which I won't necessarily go into, but in terms of an opening statement, I've heard some of the other witnesses today and been very impressed with some of the comments that have been made. I should say that the University of Newcastle Law School is a little different from some of the other law schools. It's a relatively young law school in that I think our first graduates will be 25 years on next year. So we're about, a little older than UWS, but not that much. We're quite a small law school, so we're quite different, I think, to many of the other law schools that have seen significant increases in terms of student numbers over the last decade. We've kept our student numbers relatively small in that I think we take in 190 students per year, which is small compared to, I think, most of the other New South Wales law schools, and certainly around Australia that's a relatively small cohort. We actually like being a small law school, and we have no intention to increase the number of undergraduate students that we take in. We run a different program from many of the other law schools as well, in that we have an integrated clinical program. It's integrated from the moment that students arrive, but students in particular in fourth and fifth year can opt to do their clinical program, their placement program, effectively their PLT program at Newcastle, and about more than 2/3 of the students opt to do that. So it is a different program compared to, I think, the program that operates at most other universities.
Does that program take place during the undergraduate course, or is it a postgraduate
No,
course?
it takes place during the undergraduate course in fourth and fifth year.
So that means at the end of 5 years, the student can be admitted straight away?
That's correct.
Okay.
I should say that I'm a relatively new law dean at Newcastle, so I may struggle over some questions. I've only been there for less than 4 months. I was previously at Monash for more than 5 years. I've also had time at La Trobe University, and a long time ago I was at UWS. So.
Well, just on that geographic spread of universities, what can you say about the approach of universities to the changes that are taking place within the legal profession, both technological, the competition, the need for skills? How do you see the educational landscape at the moment?
I think that there's a lot of innovation that's taking place in the educational landscape, but there's also quite a lot of inertia. Most universities have advisory bodies that help them, I think, consider what the needs of the profession are into the future. However, for many universities, it's actually quite difficult for them to change course, especially the larger universities in general. There are difficulties with funding in terms of legal education more generally across the sector. I think that inhibits some responses. There has been, I think, it's taken a long time. I'm probably an ADR expert as well, and so I look at alternative dispute resolution, and I see how that's been integrated into law curriculums over the years, and it's been a very, very slow integration compared to really what the profession is doing on a day-to-day basis. I think many universities are really grappling with technological change. I suspect that there are some standout examples, and not necessarily in law, in terms of how they're coping with it. And University of Melbourne, for example, from next year will have an integrated program in informatics, so that any student that does a BA at Melbourne University will also graduate, if they wish, with a diploma in informatics. It just seems to me that those combinations are very interesting and give students more options. And I don't think we've necessarily in law considered how we might integrate with other programs within universities, and how we can, in particular, focus on what is required to be a lawyer into the future. So there are some issues there.
Can you describe for me a diploma in informatics and exactly what that is?
I can try. But I suppose when you're looking at informatics, you're looking not just at the core literacy skills that you require to be able to deal with technology into the future, but you will be looking at big data analytics. You're also looking at a range of other matters that are going to be important, including coding, in as much as it would apply in the legal sector, it seems to me it could apply and it could be quite relevant. I should say too, I have a daughter in year 12, and when I was helping her with her work last night, she's actually learning coding already, so perhaps it's a bit unrealistic of us to expect that much of this will be provided at the university level. I suspect much of it will actually happen at the school level.
But is your university looking at the technological side of a student's education and whether they should be learning coding, or and we've heard that business skills is an important part of a graduate's makeup as far as employers are concerned. Is that something the university is looking at?
I'd have to say yes. And in terms of how we're looking at it, it might be a little different from some. I mean, I'm considering it in the context of a build-on, add-on diploma that students can do, and I think that provides them with a lot of additional support. As with most other universities, our programs are combined degree programs, so there isn't a lot of space within our law degree program, particularly because we have the placements and we also have the clinical component. So I'm looking to see what I can do with other faculties that students combine with, and whether there's a standalone university arrangement that could actually meet the needs as well. So
Does your university deliver many courses online?
No.
No. It's face-to-face teaching.
It's face-to-face. We do have blended learning in about half of our subjects. By blended learning, I mean that we've replaced law lectures in about half of our subjects with online lectures. However, at the same time, often we've increased the amount of face-to-face learning that students get.
Professor Adams made reference to 50% of his students not intending to practice law once they've graduated from Western Sydney University, and you made reference to 190 students per year being your intake. So are you finding the same statistics, so roughly 85 folks graduating at the end of each year, and if so, where are they then finding employment, may I ask?
I think it's probably a little higher in terms of the numbers who go on to practice from Newcastle. And we find that those who do the clinical program tend to have higher rates of employability than those who don't. And I think for those who do the clinical program in particular, who do the option B, if you like, that's what we call it, option A or option B, most of those will go on to practice in law. In terms of where they practice, again, some will go, a small cohort will go to the big firms. Many of them will go to local employers as well. As with UWS, our graduates go to all sorts of places. They go to legal aid, they go to the DPP. They will also go to the tax office, and of course there's a very big tax office initiative within Newcastle. They'll go to PwC, and then they'll go to sometimes local employers as well as in-house counsel. So we're seeing, I think, the rise, as you mentioned earlier, in number of students going into in-house roles. And that's where we're actually seeing really significant growth, I think, within the legal profession more generally over the last decade.
So what are the rates of employment like up in Newcastle then for graduating lawyers?
In terms of, and again, I've got 2013, 2014 figures, and we just tried to get 2015 figures, so I hope they're accurate. We find that 95% of those who graduate through the clinical program are employed full-time or part-time within 4 months of their sort of graduation date, which is fairly early at Newcastle. Of those, some of those are employed part-time, and I've looked at the part-time stats. They correlate fairly roughly with those that were actually doing their degree part-time as well. So I suspect some of them had family and other responsibilities, and they've continued that in terms of part-time work. It's not an easy environment. Our students work really hard to get jobs. They do find, I think, all of them, that the clinical program has helped them, and they find that makes them very attractive to employers.
And how do you see the future for those students? Do you think it will get even harder?
I think in a way our students are probably more protected than some that are in the big law firms, because they're not actually looking for the big law firm jobs, or not to the same extent. And we've found that shifting patterns of recruitment and more contextual recruitment is actually assisting our students in terms of even the big law firm jobs. So.
Well, there are some law firms that are moving up to Newcastle.
There are.
There's a few in my mind already.
And so Nexus, for example, is based in Newcastle. I met with the folks from Nexus the other day, and they're a great example of a very different law firm. They have their head office in Newcastle, and so I was talking with them around what we might do with our students to have a more integrated learning place again.
Sounds like Newcastle's the place to be. Michael.
Oh, good. That's a good ad for Newcastle. Thank you.
I'm just wondering whether there's any additional skills or areas of knowledge that need to be added to the law school curriculum. And if I could sort of just roll up into that question, whether the priestly leaven is still sort of fit for purpose, if you like, going forward.
It's a difficult question. I sat on the Australian Law Reform, I was the legal specialist on the Australian Law Reform Commission when we did the adversarial report many years ago, and I was just flicking through the 1998 issues paper on legal education. I don't think it was fit for purpose then, and I don't think it's really fit for purpose now. I mean, there's no doubt that students have to know about contract. There's no doubt that they have to know about tort. It's never picked up on ADR. It's now got an extra dot point that's going to be added in under civil procedure in terms of dispute resolution. It really, I don't think, is considering what students need to know or do when they're actually in practice. So I probably take a slightly different view to that of some of my colleagues.
You mentioned before that you were talking with a law firm in Newcastle. To what extent do you engage with employers or prospective employers in Newcastle to help frame the courses that you offer at the university?
Again, I think it's quite different. It's a smaller legal community. The legal community very much sees the Newcastle Law School as their law school. We have an incredibly close relationship with practitioners in the area, so it's quite different. The local practitioners are certainly very forward in terms of giving me any views about the law school, and I think that's a great and a very good, robust communication that we have. It's important.